Hey everyone, JJ here. Time for another babble. This one is another influence of mine, a huge influence. Somebody that when I discovered them at a young age, uh, just blew me away. Once again, another one of those drummers that to me is completely integral to the band, is a signature of the band, and without them being in the band, I feel the band has continued on and had a very long, successful career, but it's never been what it was. Um, the band is Korn, and the drummer is David Silveria. So, a quick story. This would be, I believe, the summer of 1995, I want to say. I was 14. My older sister had gotten tickets for myself and two of my friends to go see Megadeth, who was on tour. I believe it was for the Euthanasia record. And they had technically three bands, but one of the bands did not make it across the border to make the show, so it ended up being three bands. Megadeth was obviously the headliner, which was amazing, another one of my favorite bands. The band that opened the day, I believe, was Fear Factory, who I'll get into in another video because that was essentially the first band I ever saw at a big concert, and the impression that band made on me during that time was also massive. But today, we're talking about Korn and David Silveria. And Korn was on that tour. My friends and I had no idea who they were. Somebody may have heard of them through the grapevine, but this was the very kind of beginnings of their rising. And when we saw them, the very first thing we see is John Davis in a purple rhinestone Adidas tracksuit. And we didn't have any idea what was in store for us. But then the music hits, and it's one of those experiences that's just sticks with you. The band was unlike anything we'd ever heard. Musically, it hit us like a ton of bricks. Being in, really all of our first big concert, the immensity of the whole thing, just it's a memory that's burned into my psyche, and it really was a catalyst for making me think about pursuing a career in music and playing in bands and stuff. It was amazing. And going home from that concert, my friends, it must have been my friends, ended up buying the CD. Obviously, we were all so impressed by the bands we saw that day that I think we all went and bought Fear Factory and Megadeth and Korn records. But getting the Korn album home and being able to sit down and listen to it, again, I've mentioned in another video, Ross Robinson and his production, and the rawness that his production brought to that record, along with the band being so raw, was so influential, and it had such a huge impact on me because it wasn't the overproduced 80s albums from Bon Jovi. It was the antithesis of that, and it was so in your face and so dark. And the liner or the album booklet didn't have any lyrics in it, and listening to the lyrics on that album, the first Korn album, it was just dark and just in a bad place it was coming from. And musically, it was, they have two guitars in the band, but there's not a band I could think of that approached the two guitar thing in the same way as Korn ever did. And the bass lines, but on top of all that, the glue that I think ties that entire band together, and is sadly missed that he's not there anymore, was David Silveria. He had this mix of like Mike Borden and like these tribal tom patterns and a little bit of Tim Alexander from Primus, just unconventional kind of sounds and parts, and just insanely good drumming. And his drum sound, I was just that signature of that piccolo snare drum. And if you're a fan of Korn, you know what I mean. It's been sorely missed for me since it hasn't been there. But those first three records, the self-titled, Life is Peachy, and Follow the Leader, they have that, that piccolo snare drum sound, which to me is like just cuts through all of the din and the dark nature of the guitars and the thickness and all of that mud that's in that band. To me, the three elements that come out above all of that is John Davis's vocals sit well above that. The snare drum sticks out, and to me, that was a very influential cymbal sound. Another reason why I moved to Paiste eventually. The cymbal sounds were just well above, and just this beautiful like frequency range that was sits above the guitars, and especially apparent on those early Korn records. You could really hear that. It was very impressionable on me. So yeah, I sat down. Again, probably the entire rest of the summer, that may have been the only album I really listened to, the original Korn record, the first Korn record. I took so much from it, timekeeping, incorporating tom patterns into verses instead of just straight hi-hat parts or, conventional things. And just his integration and the way that he tied into the lyrics and the vocal delivery and, just dynamics as well, like especially for a very loud heavy metal band. That band introduced some very cool dynamics and some unconventional dynamics that I hadn't really heard before, and was really cool to take away from. So you get into the second record, Life is Peachy. I skipped school, I think, that day and went and bought that record as soon as I could. The anticipation was so high. And again, a fantastic record. The songwriting is even like a step ahead in some ways of the first record. Once again, similar sound, like the drumming is even more in the forefront on that record. The second Korn album, Life is Peachy, is a drummer's record. There's just so much on there and so much cool stuff. And, you can see the influence of David in some of my setup, the gong drum, Paiste cymbals, the setup. It's very apparent. It may not be so apparent in some of my drumming, but it's definitely there in the background. It's definitely in my thought processes when I'm coming up with original stuff. Then obviously you get into the third record, Follow the Leader. That's their big breakout, and Got the Life, and Freak on a Leash, and so many great songs off of that, and it carries on. And as I said, I'm not sure what happened in that time period from Follow the Leader up until David's departure or hiatus, whatever you want to call it, from Korn. I think it was 2005 or 2006, but to me it just seems like he may have lost the love for doing it. Maybe the camaraderie in the band was at all-time low. I know there's drug issues and things like that really kind of tore the band up for a little while there. So it's hard to say, but the See You on the Other Side, Untouchables, fantastic record. I love that record. David's playing is very much in the pocket and taking a back seat, but the songs, just amazing songs, and I think his drumming was very cool on that, and the drum sound, I love that. I love that drum sound. It's away from his signature, but I think it still works, and it works for the direction Korn went on that particular album. But yeah, you get into the later stuff with him, and it's just not there. The music's not there for me, and the drumming does nothing for me either. No fault of his. I said I don't know the circumstances behind that. He might not have been feeling it. It's always possible. And sad to say, he's come back a couple times and tried a few different bands. I've been following him, as much as I can. I'd always hoped that he would, come back and, playing drums and being in a band is where I think he belongs, and maybe he just hasn't wanted to pursue that anymore. And you know, it's a real shame to me that he was in such a huge influential band, and he's almost I don't want to say it in a negative term, but he's almost kind of like a forgotten, like a bygone era of Korn, and especially considering that Ray Luzier has been in the band, you know, twice as long as David was already by this point. And Ray's a great drummer too, but there's something about these drummers that are there at the beginning of the band that shapes the sound of the band that I really, really admire. More than chops, more than flashy displays, what I really, at the end of the day, what it comes down to me is I'm listening to music and I'm not watching. I'm listening. And if you can hold me and intrigue me just with the playing without actually seeing you, then that just endears your playing to me for the rest of the time. You know, Joey Jordison is like that. David's like that. Lars from Metallica. Jimmy Chamberlain from Smashing Pumpkins. There's numerous drummers. And I'm not the only one that would probably agree that most of those drummers would be your favorites too if you enjoy the band. But yeah, if you haven't checked out David, his playing in particular, the first Korn album, the entire record. I mean, it's the lyrics. It could be a little offensive. That's okay. It is what it is. But if you're easily offended, don't pay too much attention to the lyrics. But musically, I think you can find something that's very cool and definitive of a band's identity. Those first 3 Korn records, it's just a band that's just a steamroller. You could see that trajectory, you know, ahead of them, that they were just going to take over. At the Megadeth show I was speaking about earlier, where I saw them, I'd always heard stories about Metallica being on the Aussie tour, and fans would show up to see Metallica, and then some would leave after Metallica was done, and that was a sure sign that Metallica was on its way. And when we saw Korn on that tour, something similar happened. Maybe not the same scale, but there was definitely a crowd that was there to see them. And they were making waves at that point for people who were in the know. And if you were lucky enough to catch them at that time, you got to see something magical and just a powerhouse of a drummer. I took a lot away from that with, you know, visual style and, you know, big movements and things like that, and just driving a band and, you know, being a backbone of a band like that. So check out David Silveria, and look for him on the internet. Where is he gone? You know what I mean? Like let's find this guy and get him back into music and stuff like that, if you love him as much as I do. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.